Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're looking at a case out of Columbia, Maryland that just moved with shocking speed. It went from a missing person report to a massive international manhunt in less than 48 hours. So the scene is Columbia, Maryland. It's right around New Year's Eve, so December 31st, 2025. And this is where we're introduced to a 27-year-old Nikitha Godishala. She was a data and strategy analyst, very bright, who had moved from Hyderabad, India to, build her career here in the States. So our mission for this deep dive is to really synthesize the timeline here because it is incredibly tight. We're going to go from her last sighting to the discovery of her body and then the suspect's just immediate flight from the country. But crucially, we have to get into the conflicting narratives around the motive. Was this a crime of passion? Or was it, as her family claims, a premeditated murder over money?
And this case really requires some critical thinking. The speed at which Arjun Sharma, the main suspect, crossed international borders, it just created this immediate information vacuum. So you're dealing with two very serious but completely competing accounts of the why. And we have to distinguish what police have confirmed from the very, very serious allegations being raised by the victim's family. That's the only way to see the full picture.
Okay, let's unpack this timeline because the velocity of it, it all happens in just 3 days. It's staggering. The dates and the times, they really tell a story of cold, rapid calculation. So our timeline starts on New Year's Eve, December 31st, 2025. Investigators believe Nikitha Godishala was killed sometime after 7 p.m. that evening. This was inside her apartment on Twin Rivers Road in Columbia. The cause of death was multiple stab wounds.
Right. And the nature of the crime, multiple stab wounds, it suggests a violent, very personal conflict. But it's the fact that she wasn't discovered immediately. That delay gave the suspect a critical window.
A huge window. And that brings us to January 2nd, 2026. This is where the primary suspect, 26-year-old Arjun Sharma, who police first described as her former boyfriend and roommate, does something just audacious. He calls the Howard County Police, and he files a missing person report for Nikitha. Claims he last saw her back on the 31st. Now, here is the detail that just sets off every alarm bell for law enforcement. On the very same day, January 2nd, that he filed that missing person report.
The same day.
He leaves the United States, he gets on a flight to India.
Just think about that sequence for a second. He reports her missing, so he's creating this paper trail of cooperation, right? But then, without even waiting for a follow-up call, he's on a long-haul flight. That kind of move tells law enforcement everything. They're not dealing with a concerned citizen. They're dealing with a fugitive. And his actions just accelerate the whole thing from a routine missing person case to a top priority homicide investigation.
Exactly. And that brings the first phase of this to a close on January 3rd. Because Sharma's departure raised so much suspicion, police immediately got a search warrant for the apartment. And inside, they found her body, displaying those multiple stab wounds, confirming it was a homicide.
So in just 3 days, you go from a murder on New Year's Eve to the suspect himself reporting her missing, to him fleeing the country, and then the official discovery of the crime. That swift departure, it forced this immediate and very complex transition. The focus had to shift from, local police in Maryland to the entire apparatus of U.S. federal agencies.
That's a huge point. The second her body was found and they knew he'd fled, it's a completely different kind of investigation. We're in international territory now. So what were the first legal moves to try and catch up to him?
Well, within 24 hours of finding the body, on January 4th, Howard County Police issued formal arrest warrants for Arjun Sharma. He was charged with first and second-degree murder. And that's essential. Those warrants are the legal key you need to unlock federal help. Once a suspect in a serious felony crosses state lines, let alone international borders, it's just not a local case anymore.
So that means the FBI, the Department of Justice, they all get pulled in immediately. Is that just standard procedure, or did the flight to India make it that much more complex?
Oh, it elevates the complexity immensely. When a suspect flees the country that fast, the local jurisdiction can't do anything. The case has to go federal because international coordination, extradition, that all falls under the DOJ and federal law enforcement.
And what's really crucial for you to understand here is the immediate challenge of working with India. This isn't like a local arrest. It becomes a matter of international law, specifically extradition.
And that's a huge hurdle, right? It's not a quick process.
It's highly complex. India and the U.S., they do have a standing extradition treaty, which is good. That's the framework you need. But the hurdle is that India, like a lot of nations, can be reluctant to extradite its own citizens. And Sharma is believed to be an Indian citizen. So the crime has to meet these really strict criteria in the treaty, like dual criminality, meaning the act has to be a serious crime in both countries.
So it's not just an arrest warrant anymore, it's a prolonged diplomatic and legal negotiation. And we should probably clarify his current status because the media has been all over this.
Correct. So despite some pretty intense media reports coming out of India about possible sightings, maybe even a preliminary arrest, the official statement from Howard County Police is that the suspect remains wanted internationally. The search is very active, but he has not been apprehended. And that distinction between official confirmation and early media speculation is just so important when a case spans two different countries.
Okay, let's pivot now from the timeline, which is pretty clear, to the why. Because this is where the sources just immediately split and the case gets even more complicated. We have two completely different narratives.
Exactly. So initially, when the police started their investigation, their first statements described Arjun Sharma as Nikitha's former boyfriend and roommate.
Right.
And that framing immediately suggests a default narrative, a relationship dispute, a so-called crime of passion.
But the second Nikitha's family started speaking to the press, that whole framework got completely challenged. Her family, especially her father, stated publicly that Sharma was not her romantic partner. He was a former roommate, and that was it. Platonic. Professional.
And that fundamentally changes the entire context. It shifts it from a potential domestic tragedy to, well, to something else entirely, something much colder.
It really does. It raises the question of why the police would have jumped to former boyfriend in the first place.
Well, you can infer a couple of things. Either Sharma deliberately misled the police when he filed the report to sort of muddy the waters around motive, or the police just defaulted to the simplest explanation based on them living together. Either way, the family's testimony just wrenches the focus away from passion and points it directly at calculation.
And tied directly to that is the powerful alternative motive they allege. They claim this murder may be connected to a financial dispute. The family stated that Sharma owed Nikitha a significant amount of money.
Yes.
And that she was murdered when she demanded he repay it.
And this
we have issued
financial
arrest
motive is
warrants for
backed up
first
with
and
these
second degree
specific
murder
allegations
against
from
Arjun
family
Sharma.
members.
We are coordinating
They're
with
talking
federal
about
partners to
unauthorized
locate and apprehend
transactions
him.
from Nikitha's bank
We have
account.
issued arrest warrants
Now,
for
that is
first
the
and second
detail
degree
that
murder
elevates
against Arjun
everything.
Sharma.
If those
We are
allegations can be
coordinating with
proven,
federal
this
partners
isn't
to
some
locate
ambiguous
and
domestic
apprehend him.
dispute. It becomes a premeditated murder committed to cover up theft and fraud.
That's a huge legal distinction. So if prosecutors in the U.S. can prove that financial motive, how does that change the international pursuit?
Oh, it strengthens their case for extradition exponentially. Remember that dual criminality hurdle we talked about?
Yeah.
Well, financial crimes, fraud, and premeditated murder to conceal that fraud. Those are seen as very serious, clearly defined crimes under international law, much more so than, say, an ambiguous domestic violence case. Strategically, prosecutors will want to lean on that financial motive. It makes the case for his return legally much more compelling. It's just fascinating how we're forced to evaluate these two possibilities in real time. You have the initial police theory versus the very deep personal context from the grieving family. We do have to remember the family's information, as powerful as it is, still needs that official corroboration from U.S. authorities.
Right. Through bank records, forensic accounting, it paints this picture of a young woman who wasn't just betrayed, but potentially targeted over a debt. Let's just take a moment to circle back to Nikitha Godishala herself. She was 27 years old, a data and strategy analyst. She'd been in the U.S. for several years, building her life, her career. It's just a profound loss, and it underscores how quickly that American dream can be shattered.
And her death required this immediate and complex diplomatic response. The Indian embassy got involved right away, coordinating with U.S. authorities and with her family back in India. That coordination serves two purposes, really. First, giving consular support to the family, but second, and just as important, laying the legal and diplomatic groundwork for the long fight to come.
Laying the groundwork, that's vital. And that coordination also had a more immediate goal, which was the repatriation of her remains.
Exactly. Indian officials announced that all the legal and administrative procedures were completed and her remains were being repatriated to India. This is a massive undertaking after an international homicide. Her body was expected to arrive around January 7th or 8th, at least bringing some measure of closure to the family, even as this pursuit continues.
So what does this all mean for you, listening to this and try and make sense of the tragedy? I think the essential takeaway is just the speed and the digital flight. We've seen a case go from a missing person report in Maryland to a confirmed murder and an international fugitive search across 2 continents, all in under 48 hours.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, this case just perfectly illustrates the challenge of digital flight in modern justice.
Suspects can cross borders faster than warrants can even be processed, forcing legal systems to play catch-up. This whole situation is no longer just about arresting a suspect. It's really about testing the strength of the U.S.-India extradition relationship in the 21st century. And that raises a really important question for you to consider. Given the specific requirements of that extradition treaty and the two completely different motives we've analyzed, the crime of passion versus the premeditated financial murder, which version of the story do you think U.S. prosecutors will strategically use to meet the legal requirements to get Sharma back? Because that strategic tightrope walk, that's the real challenge facing investigators now that the search has moved into the diplomatic arena.
A truly profound look at the strategic challenges ahead. Thank you for diving deep into these sources with us today.